The azure corona of Quinaris floated, like a ghostly crown, beyond the viewport. Commander Elena Royce stood with her hands clasped behind her back, studying the spectral rings and the ice moon that hovered beneath them. From this distance, the frozen satellite looked serene, peaceful even, a deceptive calm. "Status report, Lieutenant Jin," she said, not turning from the view. Lieutenant Marco Jin's fingers danced across his console, the holographic readouts flashing in sequence. "All systems nominal, Commander. We've completed our third patrol circuit of the void. Long-range scanners show no unusual activity at the sector boundary." Elena nodded, her reflection grim in the reinforced glass. At 43, she carried the weight of 15 years in Border Patrol service. Silver streaks had begun to thread through her dark hair, pulled back in a regulation knot at the nape of her neck. The crow's feet at the corners of her eyes had deepened in the last year, an occupational hazard of constant vigilance. "Ensign Tao, any transmissions from Central Command?" she asked. The communications officer's slender fingers adjusted her earpiece. "No, Commander. Just the usual automated beacons and merchant traffic. The shipping lanes are quiet today." Elena allowed herself a small smile. Quiet was good. Quiet meant peace was holding along this fragile border between human space and the territories claimed by the unified Xenarch Council. The Argus was just one scout vessel, lightly armed, primarily equipped for reconnaissance and early warning. If trouble came, their job was to sound the alarm, not to stand and fight. "Dr. Verma, what about the anomalous readings we detected yesterday?" Elena turned toward the science station where Aisha Verma hunched over her instruments. The scientist straightened, rubbing tired eyes. "Nothing conclusive, Commander. The energy fluctuations appear to be naturally occurring. Probably ionic discharges in Quinaris's upper atmosphere interacting with the ring system." Elena crossed to the science station, examining the readouts over Dr. Verma's shoulder. The scientist's dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her uniform rumpled from the 18-hour shift she'd insisted on working. Brilliant and dedicated, if sometimes lacking in self-preservation instincts. "You should get some rest, Doctor," Elena said quietly. "Those fluctuations will still be there after you've had some sleep." Dr. Verma opened her mouth to protest, but was interrupted by Ensign Tao's urgent voice. "Commander, I'm detecting a large mass signature entering the system. It's massive. Displacement reading suggests a capital ship, at minimum." Elena was instantly alert, moving back to the command chair at the center of the bridge. "Identification?" "Working on it," Tao replied, her fingers flying across her console. "They're not broadcasting standard IFF. Wait, I'm getting something. It's Xenarch, Commander, the flagship Celestia." A hush fell over the bridge. The Celestia was the pride of the Xenarch fleet, a massive vessel that rarely ventured beyond the core systems of Council space. Its presence here, in this unremarkable border system, could mean nothing good. "Battle stations," Elena ordered calmly. "Sound general quarters. Lieutenant Jin, bring our defensive systems to stand by. But do not power weapons. I want no provocative actions." The alarm klaxon wailed through the ship as crew members rushed to their emergency stations. Elena remained standing, her face impassive despite the tension coiling in her stomach. "Open a channel to the Celestia. Ensign," she instructed. "Standard diplomatic protocols." "Channel open, Commander." Elena squared her shoulders. "This is Commander Elena Royce of the Earth Alliance vessel Argus. You have entered restricted space without prior notification. State your purpose, Celestia." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a severe face with distinctly non-human features. Admiral Kralvor's scaled skin gleamed under the harsh lights of his bridge, the twin membranes of his inner eyelids flicking rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. "Commander Royce." The Admiral's voice was deep, resonant, and tinged with undisguised contempt. "How fortunate to find you patrolling this backwater." Elena kept her expression neutral. "Admiral Kralvor, the Quinaris Void is under Earth Alliance protection as established by the Treaty of Proxima. Your presence here without diplomatic clearance constitutes a violation of that treaty." Kralvor's lipless mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. "The Treaty of Proxima is being renegotiated, Commander. The Council has determined that human expansion has proceeded unchecked for too long. We are here to establish new boundaries. Any renegotiation of existing treaties requires bilateral discussion through established diplomatic channels." Elena replied evenly. "This unannounced military presence suggests coercion rather than negotiation." "Call it what you wish." Kralvor's inner eyelids flicked again. "The reality is simple. The Unified Xenarch Council demands the immediate surrender of all human outposts in the Quinaris system. You will power down your vessel and prepare to be boarded." Elena felt a cold fury building beneath her calm exterior. "That demand is rejected, Admiral. The Argus will not stand down, nor will we surrender any territory under Earth Alliance protection. I suggest you withdraw your vessel before this situation escalates beyond diplomatic repair." Kralvor leaned forward, his alien features twisting. "Your species has forgotten its place, Commander. Perhaps it is time for a reminder of the natural order. You have 1 hour to reconsider your position, or we will provide that reminder ourselves." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. "Options," Elena said tersely, turning to her officers. Lieutenant Jin spoke first. "The Celestia outguns us by at least 20 to 1. Commander, even if we could outrun them, which I doubt, they could destroy any human outpost in the system before help arrives." "Can we get a distress signal to Central Command?" Elena asked. Ensign Tao shook her head. "They're jamming long-range communications. Commander, we could try using the comboys to relay a message, but it would take days to reach headquarters." "We don't have days," Elena murmured. She turned to the tactical display, studying the Celestia's position relative to Quinaris and its moons. "How many civilian personnel are currently stationed in the system?" "The research outpost on Quinaris Prime has 32 scientists," Dr. Verma replied. "The mining operation on the Ice Moon has another 57, plus crew for support vessels, maybe 100 souls altogether." Elena nodded grimly. 100 lives in her hands. 100 humans who'd be at the mercy of Kralvor if she made the wrong choice. "Lieutenant Jin, plot a course for the Ice Moon," she decided. "We'll use Quinaris's rings to mask our approach. If Kralvor wants a fight, we'll give him one, but on our terms, not his." The hour passed with excruciating slowness. Elena used the time to brief her crew and prepare them for what might come. The Argus was no match for the Celestia in direct combat, but they had other advantages: intimate knowledge of the system, maneuverability, and the fact that Kralvor clearly underestimated them. When the deadline expired, the Celestia made no immediate move. Elena remained tense at her command station, watching the enemy vessel through the Argus's sensors. "What is he waiting for?" Lieutenant Jin wondered aloud. As if in answer, multiple smaller craft suddenly detached from the Celestia's hull, sleek, predatory shapes accelerating toward the Argus. Fighter craft. Elena identified them instantly. "Evasive maneuvers. Lieutenant, take us into the rings." The Argus banked sharply, diving toward the shimmering azure bands that encircled Quinaris. The pursuing fighters followed, spreading out to cut off potential escape routes. "They're trying to hurt us," Elena observed. "Lieutenant Jin, prepare to execute Pattern Sigma on my mark." "Pattern Sigma, aye," Jin confirmed, his fingers poised over the controls. The Xenarch fighters drew closer, their weapons still silent. Elena waited, counting the seconds, watching as the enemy formation tightened around them. "Now," she ordered. The Argus abruptly reversed thrust, spinning on its axis and accelerating back toward the oncoming fighters. The unexpected maneuver caught the Xenarch pilots by surprise, forcing them to scatter to avoid collision. "Take us between those two squadrons," Elena commanded. "Full thrust!" The Argus shot through the gap in the enemy formation, engines straining. For a moment, it seemed they might break free entirely. Then the Celestia fired. A massive energy beam lanced out from the flagship's forward battery, striking the Argus's port nacelle. The scout ship lurched violently, throwing crew members against bulkheads and consoles. "Direct hit!" Lieutenant Jin shouted over the blaring alarms. "Port engine failing. Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. Emergency containment holding." Elena gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered around her. "Return fire! All batteries!" The Argus's modest weapon systems responded, sending pulses of energy toward the distant flagship. Against the Celestia's shields, they were little more than irritants. "Evasive pattern Delta," Elena ordered. "Keep us moving!" Another blast from the Celestia caught them in the stern. The bridge lights flickered and died, replaced seconds later by the red glow of emergency power. "We've lost main power," Jin reported grimly. "Running on auxiliaries now." Elena made a rapid calculation. With main power gone and one engine crippled, they couldn't outrun the Xenarch forces. Fighting was suicide. That left one option. "Set course for the ice moon," she commanded. "Maximum survivable velocity." "Commander?" Jin looked at her in shock. "You heard me, Lieutenant. If we can't win this fight, we make sure we survive it. The ice moon has shelters, supplies, and defensible positions. We make our stand there." Understanding dawned on Jin's face. He nodded and adjusted their course. The damaged Argus limped toward the frozen satellite, pursued by Xenarch fighters that seemed content to harry rather than destroy them. Elena suspected Kralvor wanted them alive, probably to make an example of them. She had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. "All hands, prepare for emergency landing procedures," she announced over the ship-wide comm. "Secure all sensitive data and equipment for possible abandonment. This is not a drill." The ice moon grew larger in their viewports, its cratered surface gleaming dully in Quinaris's reflected light. The Argus shuddered and groaned as it entered the thin atmosphere, hull plates glowing red with friction. "Terrain ahead largely flat," Dr. Verma reported, studying the scanner readings. "But I'm detecting unusual subsurface structures, approximately 20 kilometers from our projected landing zone." "Natural formations?" Elena asked. "Negative, Commander. These appear artificial and old. Very old." Elena filed that information away. "Focus on the landing, Doctor. We'll investigate anomalies after we're on the ground." The final descent was controlled chaos. Lieutenant Jin wrestled with the failing controls, fighting to keep their angle of approach shallow enough to prevent a catastrophic impact. Warning alarms screamed as systems failed in cascading sequence. Elena moved through the bridge, securing loose equipment and ensuring her crew was braced for impact. "Brace, brace, brace!" Jin shouted as the surface rushed up to meet them. The Argus hit the ice with a thunderous impact, skidding across the frozen plain in a shower of sparks and debris. Elena was thrown violently against a bulkhead, pain exploding in her shoulder. Through the viewport, she watched as a jagged fissure in the ice opened directly in their path. "Hard to port!" she yelled. Jin wrenched the controls, and the Argus groaned as it slewed sideways, avoiding the crevasse by meters. The ship finally ground to a halt, half buried in crystalline snow, steam rising from its superheated hull. For a long moment, there was only the sound of labored breathing and the creak of cooling metal. Then, Elena pushed herself upright, ignoring the throbbing in her shoulder. "Status report," she demanded. Jin checked his flickering console. "Hull integrity at 62%. Life support functional but degraded. Weapon systems offline. Communications limited to short range only." "Casualties?" Reports coming in from all decks, Ensign Tao replied, pressing her earpiece closer. Multiple injuries, but no fatalities reported so far. Elena nodded, relief momentarily overwhelming the pain in her shoulder. Dr. Verma, coordinate with medical to treat the wounded. Lieutenant Jin, I want damage control teams deployed immediately. Ensign Tao, establish a secure perimeter around the ship and set up short-range sensor arrays. The Xenarch will be coming for us. As her crew moved to execute her orders, Elena turned to the viewport. Through the crystalline layer of frost already forming on the glass, she could see the looming shape of Quinaris, its rings casting bands of shadow across the ice moon's surface. Somewhere above them, the Celestia would be preparing landing parties, confident in their overwhelming advantage. They had broken the oldest rule in the galaxy. Now, they would learn why it existed in the first place. The temporary command center had been established in what remained of the Argus's cargo bay, one of the few spaces large enough to accommodate planning sessions while remaining structurally sound. Elena stood before a holographic display of the surrounding terrain, her arm now in a makeshift sling fashioned from medical supplies. We have 3 immediate priorities, she told the assembled officers. First, restore communications to contact Earth Alliance headquarters. Second, secure our position against Xenarch ground forces. Third, locate and evacuate the civilian mining operation before they're caught in the crossfire. Lieutenant Jin gestured to the display. The mining facility is here, approximately 12 kilometers west of our position. According to our last update, they were operating with a skeleton crew, mostly automated systems with human overseers. That's something, at least, Elena nodded. What about our defensive options? Limited, Jin admitted. We've salvaged the portable shield generators and most of our small arms, but nothing that could seriously threaten the Celestia or even their landing craft. Dr. Verma cleared her throat. Commander, about those subsurface structures I detected during our descent. I've been analyzing the data more closely. They appear to be artificial constructs of human origin, but they predate any recorded settlement in this system. Elena turned to her, suddenly interested. How much older? Based on degradation patterns and depth, at least 2 centuries. They may date back to the First Interstellar War. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. The First Interstellar War was semi-legendary now, the brutal conflict that had established humanity's place among the stars and led to the formation of the Earth Alliance. It had ended with the Treaty of Proxima and the establishment of the Unified Xenarch Council as a counterbalance to human expansion. Are you suggesting we've crashed near some kind of abandoned military installation? Elena asked. Dr. Verma nodded. It's possible. The energy signatures are consistent with powered-down systems, rather than completely dead ones. There might be something still functional down there. Hope flickered in Elena's chest for the first time since the Celestia had appeared. Assemble an expedition team. Doctor, I want to know what's under the ice. Commander, Ensign Tao interrupted urgently. Sensors are detecting multiple atmospheric entries. Xenarch landing craft, at least 5 of them. ETA to surface, 12 minutes. The flicker of hope threatened to extinguish. Time to see what kind of soldiers the Xenarch Council sends to do its dirty work, Elena said grimly. Lieutenant Jin, deploy our security teams in defensive positions around the ship. Use the ice formations for cover. Ensign Tao, maintain sensor coverage. I want to know where those craft land and how many troops they deploy. As her officers hurried to execute her orders, Elena turned back to the holographic display. The situation was dire, but not yet hopeless. If Dr. Verma's discovery panned out, they might find resources to even the odds. If not, then they would make the Xenarch pay dearly for every meter of ground they took. The first Xenarch landing craft touched down 3 kilometers from the Argus, disgorging armored troops that immediately began advancing toward the downed scout ship. Elena watched their methodical approach through tactical binoculars. noting their formation and equipment. "Standard shock troops," she muttered to Lieutenant Jin, who crouched beside her behind an ice ridge. "Heavy armor, disruptor rifles. They're expecting a conventional defense." Jin checked the charge on his sidearm. "Which we can't provide. Our security teams are outnumbered at least 5-1. "Then we don't fight conventionally," Elena replied. She activated her comm unit. "All teams, execute scatter protocol. I repeat, scatter protocol." Across their defensive perimeter, Alliance security personnel began withdrawing from their positions, falling back in seemingly chaotic patterns that nevertheless followed a carefully planned sequence. The advancing Xenarch troops hesitated, clearly confused by the apparent retreat. "They expected us to make a stand at the ship," Jin observed. Elena nodded. "And now they're wondering if it's a trap." She raised her binoculars again, focusing on a Xenarch officer, gesturing emphatically to his subordinates. "They'll proceed with caution, which buys us time. Has Dr. Verma's team departed yet?" "Yes, Commander. They left through the emergency access hatch 10 minutes ago, heading for the nearest subsurface anomaly." "Good." Elena lowered her binoculars. "Now, we need to keep the Xenarch occupied while they work. Lieutenant, it's time to introduce our visitors to the concept of guerrilla warfare." Over the next 6 hours, Elena led a series of lightning strikes against the Xenarch forces. Small teams of Alliance personnel would emerge from concealed positions in the ice, engage the enemy briefly, then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The tactics were designed not to inflict heavy casualties, but to frustrate and disorient the Xenarch troops, forcing them to proceed with increasing caution. By the time the short lunar day began fading into night, the Xenarch had advanced less than a kilometer toward the Argus. Elena regrouped with Jin at a forward observation post, her breath fogging in the rapidly cooling air. Despite the environmental systems in her combat suit, she felt the bitter cold seeping into her bones. "Status?" she asked. Jin consulted his tactical pad. "We've lost 2 security officers, wounded, not killed. The Xenarch have suffered approximately 12 casualties. They've halted their advance and established a defensive perimeter. Looks like they're settling in for the night." "And our ship?" "Still secure. We've completed the evacuation of all critical systems and personnel. Only automated defenses remain." Elena nodded, satisfied. "Any word from Dr. Verma?" "Not yet," Jin frowned. "They should have reached the subsurface structure by now." As if summoned by their discussion, Elena's comm unit crackled to life. "Commander!" Dr. Verma's voice came through, distorted by interference. "Can you hear me?" "I hear you, Doctor. What's your status?" "You need to see this." Dr. Verma's voice held an uncharacteristic note of awe. "We've found... I don't even know how to describe it. It's..." The transmission cut off abruptly. Elena exchanged a concerned look with Jin. "Interference or something else?" "Could be the ice," Jin suggested. "Or they might have activated something that's causing electromagnetic disruption. We need to find out." Elena made a quick decision. "Lieutenant, you're in command until I return. Continue harassment tactics, but preserve our forces. Don't engage directly unless absolutely necessary." "Where are you going, Commander?" Elena checked the charge on her sidearm. "To see what Dr. Verma has found under the ice." The journey to the subsurface anomaly was treacherous. Elena moved carefully through the frozen landscape, using natural formations for cover and constantly checking for Xenarch patrols. The temperature continued to drop as Quinaris set below the horizon, leaving only the ghostly light of the gas giant's rings to illuminate her path. She located the entrance Dr. Verma's team had uncovered, a narrow fissure in the ice that had been widened with cutting tools. A guide rope disappeared into the darkness below. Elena switched on her suit's headlamp and began her descent. The ice tunnel plunged nearly 30 meters straight down before opening into a larger chamber. As Elena's boots touched solid ground, her headlamp revealed smooth, artificial walls that definitely weren't natural ice formations. The architecture was unmistakably human in design, but with an austere functionality that spoke of military purpose. "Dr. Verma?" she called out, her voice echoing strangely in the enclosed space. "In here, Commander," came the reply from deeper within the structure. Elena followed the sound, moving through a series of interconnected chambers. The facility appeared to be some kind of bunker, or command post, with abandoned workstations and equipment that, despite their age, looked remarkably preserved. She found Dr. Verma and her team in what appeared to be a central control room. The scientist stood before a massive display screen that, impossibly, was active and glowing with a soft blue light. "How?" Elena began, staring at the functioning technology. "Fusion generators," Dr. Verma explained, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. Still operational after all this time. The whole facility was in standby mode, drawing minimal power until our presence triggered some kind of automated revival sequence. Elena approached the display, noticing that the text scrolling across it was in an older dialect of Standard English. "What is this place?" "A node in something called the Sentinel Network," Dr. Verma replied. "From what we've been able to piece together, it was established during the final years of the First Interstellar War as a last resort defense system. There are similar installations throughout human-controlled space, all interconnected." "A defense system?" Elena studied the scrolling data more carefully. "What kind of defenses?" In answer, Dr. Verma touched a control panel. The main display changed to show a schematic of the Quinaris system, with pulsing red dots at various locations around the ice moon, the gas giant, and throughout the ring system. "Automated weapons platforms," Dr. Verma said quietly. "Hundreds of them, hidden in the ice in the rings, railguns, missile batteries, drone deployment hangars, all dormant but functional. This facility is a command node that can activate and control them." Elena felt her breath catch. If this information was accurate, they were standing in a control center for a weapons system of staggering destructive potential, one that had remained hidden and forgotten for centuries. "Can we use it against the Celestia?" she asked. Dr. Verma hesitated. "Theoretically, yes. But, Commander, this system was designed for full-scale war. The destructive capacity." She gestured to another part of the display. "The simulations suggest it could destroy not just the Celestia, but any vessel in the system, including civilian ships. The collateral damage would be enormous." Elena studied the tactical projections with growing concern. The doctor was right. This wasn't a surgical instrument but a sledgehammer. Using it would protect their immediate position but potentially kill hundreds of innocents. "Is there a way to limit its deployment? Target specific vessels or areas?" Dr. Verma turned to the control panel again, her fingers moving across the ancient interface. "The system does allow for selective activation of individual weapon platforms. We could, in theory, create a more focused response, but it would require precise calibration and targeting." "Then, that's what we'll do," Elena decided. "We need options, Doctor. Not just total destruction. Keep working on it. I need to get back to our defensive positions and brief Lieutenant Jin." As Elena turned to leave, Dr. Verma called after her. "Commander, there's something else you should see." She led Elena to an adjacent chamber that appeared to be an archive or library. Physical data storage, actual books and paper documents, lined the walls alongside more modern crystal data matrices. At the center stood a pedestal with a single, leather-bound volume open to a specific page. "We found this when the systems reactivated," Dr. Verma explained. "It appears to be some kind of operational directive or fundamental principle." Elena leaned forward to read the faded text. The header, written in bold letters, proclaimed, "The oldest rule, do not provoke humanity." Below it, in smaller text, for dissemination to all Xenarch Council members and affiliated species. This directive supersedes all other treaties and agreements. Humanity, while maintaining peaceful relations with the unified Xenarch Council, reserves the absolute right of self-defense. Any unprovoked attack on human settlements, vessels, or personnel will be met with overwhelming force. The Sentinel Network remains vigilant. Remember the Arcturus incident. Remember why the First War ended. This warning constitutes the sole notice that will be provided. Elena read the words twice, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the subterranean cold. This isn't just a military installation, she realized aloud. It's a deterrent, a warning. One the current Xenarch leadership has apparently forgotten, Dr. Verma added quietly. Or chosen to ignore, Elena thought grimly. Either way, Admiral Kralvor had miscalculated badly. The question now was how to use this discovery to end the conflict without unnecessary bloodshed. Continue your work on selective targeting, she instructed Dr. Verma. I need to return to our forces and develop a new strategy based on this information. As Elena made her way back to the surface, her mind raced with implications. The Xenarch had broken the oldest rule in the galaxy, and now she held the power to show them exactly why that had been a terrible mistake. Lieutenant Jin met her at the rendezvous point, his expression grim. The situation has deteriorated, Commander. The Xenarch have received reinforcements. 2 more landing craft arrived while you were below. They've begun a coordinated advance on our positions. Elena quickly briefed him on what they'd discovered beneath the ice, watching his eyes widen as he grasped the implications. A functioning defense grid from the First War, he whispered. That could change everything. It could also kill everyone in the system if improperly deployed, Elena cautioned. Dr. Verma is working on more selective targeting protocols, but we need time. Jin nodded thoughtfully. What if we give the Xenarch something else to worry about? The mining facility to the west has been evacuated, but its systems are still operational. If we could remotely trigger some of the industrial equipment, make it look like we're consolidating forces there. A diversion, Elena nodded approvingly. It might split their forces. Buy us the time we need. Make it happen, Lieutenant. While Jin worked on the diversion, Elena made contact with the scattered Alliance security teams, reorganizing them into a more cohesive defense that could slow the Xenarch advance. The night passed in a blur of tactical repositioning and brief, violent skirmishes across the frozen landscape. By the time Quinaris rose again above the horizon, Elena's forces had been pushed back to within half a kilometer of the downed Argus. The Xenarch troops advanced methodically, using their superior numbers to probe for weaknesses in the human defensive positions. Elena's comm unit crackled to life. Commander, this is Dr. Verma. We've done it. Selective targeting protocols are online. We can activate specific weapon platforms without triggering the entire network. Hope surged through Elena's exhausted body. Excellent work, Doctor. What are our best options? There are 3 railgun emplacements concealed within the nearby ridgeline, Dr. Verma replied. They have direct firing solutions on the Xenarch ground forces. Additionally, we've located a drone hangar beneath the northern ice sheet that could deploy atmospheric interceptors against their landing craft. Casualties if we deploy both systems? A pause. Xenarch ground forces would suffer approximately 70 to 80% casualties. Their landing craft would be disabled, but not destroyed if we calibrate correctly. Civilian casualties should be 0, assuming no unregistered vessels have entered the combat zone. Elena made her decision. Activate both systems on my command. But first, open a channel to the Celestia. It's time Admiral Kralvor understood exactly what he stirred up. Minutes later, Elena stood before a portable comm unit, facing the sneering visage of Admiral Kralvor on the small screen. Commander Royce, the Admiral's voice dripped with condescension. I had expected you to surrender by now. Your resistance, while admirably tenacious, is ultimately futile. Perhaps, Elena replied evenly. But before you commit your forces to a final assault, you should be aware that we've discovered something beneath the ice. Something your ancestors were apparently wise enough to fear. Kralvor's inner eyelids flicked rapidly, a sign Elena now recognized as uncertainty. More human deception, he scoffed, but there was a new tension in his posture. Not deception, Admiral, revelation. Elena nodded to an off-screen technician, and the transmission split to show footage from the subsurface facility, the active displays, the weapon schematics, and finally, the text of the oldest rule. "Does this look familiar, Admiral?" Elena asked quietly. "It should. It's the reason the First Interstellar War ended with a treaty rather than unconditional surrender. It's the reason the unified Xenarch Council has maintained peace with humanity for 2 centuries. Ancient history," Kralvor dismissed, but his voice lacked conviction. "Whatever weapons you found are relics. Commander, they cannot stand against modern Xenarch technology. Would you bet the Celestia on that, Admiral? Would you bet the lives of everyone aboard her?" Elena leaned closer to the camera. "Because I now control a defense grid designed to obliterate entire fleets. A system your own council acknowledged was too dangerous to challenge, hence the oldest rule." She could see the calculation happening behind Kralvor's alien eyes, weighing the possibility that she was bluffing against the consequences if she wasn't. "As a gesture of good faith," Elena continued, "I'll provide a demonstration. Dr. Verma, activate targeting protocol 1. In the distance, a section of the ice ridge suddenly split open, revealing the muzzle of a massive railgun that swiveled to target the nearest concentration of Xenarch troops. Before they could react, it fired, not directly at the troops, but at an empty expanse of ice several hundred meters to their flank. The hypervelocity projectile struck with devastating force, creating a shockwave that knocked Xenarch soldiers off their feet without causing casualties. The message was clear. The next shot wouldn't miss. On the comm screen, Admiral Kralvor's expression had shifted from contempt to wary respect. "It seems I may have underestimated the resources at your disposal, Commander. A common mistake when dealing with humanity." "Admiral," Elena replied coldly, "one your predecessors learned not to make. Now, shall we discuss terms for your withdrawal from this system, or would you prefer a more comprehensive demonstration of the Sentinel Network's capabilities?" The negotiations were brief and to the point. Kralvor agreed to withdraw his ground forces and return the Celestia to a neutral position at the system's edge. In return, Elena promised not to activate the full defense grid or call for alliance reinforcements, provided the Xenarch made no further aggressive moves. As the Xenarch troops retreated to their landing craft, Elena gathered her senior officers in what remained of the Argus's bridge. "This is a temporary victory at best," she told them frankly. "Once Kralvor reports back to the unified Xenarch Council, they'll reassess their strategy. They may return with a larger force, or they may decide the risk isn't worth it." "Could we use the Sentinel Network to send a message to Earth Alliance headquarters?" Lieutenant Jin suggested. Dr. Verma mentioned it was part of an interconnected system. Dr. Verma nodded thoughtfully. "It's possible. The network was designed with communication redundancies to function, even if standard channels were compromised. If we could access those protocols." "Make it your priority," Elena instructed. "In the meantime, we need to—" She was interrupted by a sudden alarm from the sensor console. Ensign Tao hurried to check the readings. "Multiple signatures detected entering the system," she reported, her voice tight with tension. "Configuration unknown. They don't match any known Xenarch or Alliance vessels." "Reinforcements?" Jin asked. "Kralvor breaking his word already?" Elena moved to the sensor display, studying the approaching signatures. "No, these are coming from the opposite vector. And look at their formation. Perfect spacing, synchronized velocity. That's not a hastily assembled strike force. That's a fleet that's trained together. But whose fleet? Dr. Verma wondered. We haven't had time to send any distress calls. A sudden realization dawned on Elena. We didn't need to, she said quietly. The Sentinel network did it for us. What do you mean? Jin asked. The text of the oldest rule mentioned that the Sentinel network remains vigilant, Elena explained. What if that wasn't just a warning, but a literal description? What if activating even part of the network here triggered some kind of automated response throughout the system? The theory was confirmed moments later, when Ensign Tao gasped in surprise. Commander, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. It's in an old military band, but it's definitely human in origin. Put it through, Elena ordered. The bridge speakers crackled, and a voice spoke in formal, slightly archaic standard English. Sentinel protocol activated. Confirmation required. Repeat. Confirmation required. Elena exchanged glances with her officers, then stepped forward. This is Commander Elena Royce of the Earth Alliance vessel Argus. We have activated a node of the Sentinel network in response to unprovoked aggression by Xenarch forces. Confirmation provided. A pause. Then, confirmation accepted. Commander Royce, the dormant fleet has been awakened. Convergence at your coordinates in 37 minutes. Stand by for further instructions. As the transmission ended, Dr. Verma's eyes widened in understanding. The dormant fleet. They must be automated or semi-automated vessels, stationed throughout human space, programmed to respond if the Sentinel network was ever activated. A dead hand, Elena murmured. Insurance against extinction. Our ancestors left nothing to chance. The implications were staggering. For centuries, an invisible defensive grid had slumbered beneath the surface of human-controlled worlds, ready to awaken at the first sign of existential threat. The unified Xenarch Council had not merely broken a political agreement. They had triggered an automated defense system designed by humanity at its most determined and ruthless. Lieutenant Jin voiced what they were all thinking. What happens when these vessels arrive? Will they attack the Celestia without waiting for orders? We can't risk it, Elena decided immediately. Open a channel to Admiral Kralvor. He needs to understand what's coming and why he should be very, very far away when it arrives. The conversation with Kralvor was tense but productive. The Admiral's initial skepticism evaporated when Elena shared sensor data showing the approaching fleet. Vessels of unfamiliar but clearly human design, moving with unmistakable military precision. You claim you cannot control these automated defenders? Kralvor asked, his voice taut with concern. I can communicate with them, Elena clarified, but they operate according to programming established during the First War. They recognize the activation of the Sentinel network as evidence of a clear and present danger to humanity. Unless I convince them otherwise, they will interpret your presence as hostile and respond accordingly. And what would such a response entail? Elena met his gaze steadily. Total destruction of all Xenarch forces in the system, followed by a strategic counterstrike against Xenarch core worlds. The Admiral's scaled skin paled visibly. That would mean war. Full-scale, interstellar war. Yes, Elena agreed grimly. A war neither of our species wants or needs. So I suggest you withdraw the Celestia beyond the system boundary immediately. I'll attempt to convince the automated fleet that the threat has been neutralized. Kralvor didn't hesitate. Withdrawal proceedings are already underway. Commander, I trust you will be persuasive in your communications with these ancient guardians. One more thing, Admiral, Elena added, as Kralvor prepared to end the transmission. When you report back to the Unified Xenarch Council, make sure they understand exactly why this happened. Make sure they remember the oldest rule. Kralvor's inner eyelids flicked once, slowly, a gesture of solemn acknowledgement. That, Commander Royce, I can promise you. The Celestia departed with remarkable speed, accelerating toward the jump point at the edge of the system. Elena watched its retreat with a mixture of relief and apprehension. One crisis averted, another approaching. 37 minutes later, exactly as promised, the dormant fleet arrived. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 12 vessels of varying sizes, their hulls bearing the distinctive architecture of early Earth Alliance design, but with modifications and weapon systems unfamiliar to Elena's experienced eye. Unlike the sleek, organic curves of modern spacecraft, these ships were angular and purposeful, built for war rather than exploration or diplomacy. "They're beautiful," Lieutenant Jin murmured, watching the tactical display as the vessels took up defensive positions around Quinaris and its moons. "And terrifying," Dr. Verma added softly. "To think they've been out there all this time, waiting." The lead vessel, a massive cruiser that dwarfed even the Celestia, established communication with the surface. A holographic interface materialized in the center of the Argus's bridge, and a figure appeared, humanoid, but clearly artificial, its features too perfect to be flesh and blood. "Commander Elena Royce," the entity stated, its voice resonant, but subtly inhuman. "I am Strategic Interface Area 7, commanding the 7th Sentinel Fleet. The oldest rule has been broken. Protocol dictates immediate retaliatory action against all Xenarch assets. Please confirm target priorities." Elena stepped forward, choosing her words carefully. "Strategic Interface Area 7. The immediate threat has been neutralized. The Xenarch vessel Celestia has withdrawn from the system under negotiated terms. No retaliatory strike is required at this time." The artificial intelligence regarded her impassively. Negotiation is not consistent with protocol. The breaking of the oldest rule requires demonstration of consequences to prevent recurrence. "The demonstration has been made," Elena insisted. "The activation of this node of the Sentinel network and the arrival of your fleet have provided sufficient proof of humanity's defensive capabilities. Further escalation would lead to unnecessary loss of life and potential full-scale war." Area 7's expression remained neutral, but Elena sensed calculations occurring behind those artificial eyes, complex algorithms weighing her words against centuries-old programming. "You propose deviation from established protocol," the AI stated finally. "Justification required." Elena drew a deep breath. "The galaxy has changed since your programming was established. Humanity and the Xenarch have maintained peace for generations. This incident represents not a systematic threat, but an isolated misjudgment by one admiral. Demonstrating restraint now preserves the possibility of continued peaceful coexistence, while still enforcing respect for human sovereignty." A long pause followed as Area 7 processed this reasoning. "Assessment. Logical but incomplete," the AI concluded. "Additional safeguards required to prevent future violations of the oldest rule." "What kind of safeguards?" Elena asked cautiously. "The Sentinel fleet will remain active but dormant within this system," Area 7 announced. "Similar activations will occur at other nodes throughout human space. The Unified Xenarch Council will be formally notified of the reawakening of the Sentinel network and reminded of the consequences should the oldest rule be broken again." It wasn't ideal. The presence of these ancient warships would certainly escalate tensions, but it was better than immediate retaliation. Elena nodded her agreement. "Acceptable terms. How long will the fleet remain deployed?" "Until deemed unnecessary," Area 7 replied simply. "I will transfer operational protocols for the local Sentinel node to your command. Regular Alliance forces should be dispatched to secure this system permanently." With that, the AI disappeared, leaving Elena and her officers staring at the empty space where the hologram had been. "Did we just negotiate with a 200-year-old artificial intelligence?" Lieutenant Jin asked incredulously. "Apparently," Elena replied, a hint of humor breaking through her exhaustion. "And more successfully than with Admiral Kralvor. I might add. The days that followed were a blur of activity. True to Aria 7's word, the Sentinel fleet took up positions throughout the Quinaris system, their presence a silent but unmistakable warning to any who might consider challenging human sovereignty. The node beneath the ice continued to yield its secrets, providing Dr. Verma and her team with insights into the defensive technologies and strategies developed during the First Interstellar War. Communications with Earth Alliance headquarters were eventually restored, leading to the arrival of reinforcement vessels and engineering teams to salvage the Argus. Elena spent long hours debriefing senior officers about the encounter with the Celestia and the awakening of the Sentinel network. 1 week after the confrontation, Elena stood once more on what remained of the Argus's observation deck, watching as Alliance technicians worked to prepare the damaged vessel for transport back to a proper shipyard. Lieutenant Jin joined her, offering a steaming cup of coffee. "Credits for your thoughts, Commander?" he asked. Elena accepted the cup gratefully, warming her hands around it. "I was thinking about the oldest rule," she admitted, "and wondering how many other forgotten warnings are out there, waiting to be remembered at precisely the wrong moment." Jin nodded thoughtfully. "The Xenarch won't forget this one again anytime soon. Word is that Admiral Kralvor has been recalled to the Council for consultations. Diplomatic speak for a serious dressing down. Small comfort to those who were injured or killed because of his arrogance," Elena replied. "True," Jin acknowledged, "but it could have been much worse. Without your restraint, we might be looking at the beginning of a second interstellar war right now." Elena took a sip of her coffee, considering this. "It wasn't just restraint," she said finally. "It was respect for what our ancestors built. Not just weapons, but safeguards with the wisdom to know when not to use them. Area 7 could have ignored my reasoning and launched retaliatory strikes, but it was programmed to listen, to consider alternatives to violence when possible." "Even after 2 centuries, Jin marveled. "Especially after 2 centuries, Elena corrected. "The people who survived the First War understood the cost of conflict better than anyone. They built the Sentinel network not just to fight, but to deter, to make the oldest rule something more than words on a page." Their conversation was interrupted by a communication alert. A junior officer approached, saluting crisply. "Commander Royce, your presence is requested at the subsurface facility. The Alliance delegation has arrived to formally assess the Sentinel node." Elena nodded. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." As the officer departed, Jin gave her a questioning look. "Will you recommend reactivating the entire network, now that we know it exists?" "That's above my pay grade, Lieutenant," Elena replied wryly. "But I'll make sure the decision-makers understand exactly what they're dealing with, both the power and the responsibility." The Sentinel fleet remained in orbit around Quinaris, silent and vigilant, their ancient weapon systems trained outward toward the stars. Beyond the system's edge, Elena knew, diplomatic channels between the Earth Alliance and the unified Xenarch Council were humming with urgent communications as both sides adjusted to the new reality. The oldest rule had been broken, then remembered, then reinforced. Whatever came next would be shaped by that remembrance, by the understanding that humanity, even when seemingly vulnerable, was never truly defenseless. As Elena prepared to meet the Alliance delegation, she found herself hoping that this understanding would lead not to further militarization, but to a more stable and respectful peace. The Sentinel network had done its job. Now, it was up to the diplomats to build something worth protecting. But if they failed, if someone again forgot the oldest rule in the galaxy, Elena knew with absolute certainty what would happen. They would be reminded, just as Admiral Kralvor had been. And next time, there might not be someone like her to argue for restraint.